hit the record button there. Oops. Several people had contacted me and said, are you going to record it? And I said, yes. And then I forgot to hit the record when I start. This is new for me also. Oops, we're getting some feedback. I think we're okay now. This is a new platform for me too. When I started doing these with you all across the state, I just kind of threw myself out there. And so it's something that I'm learning about as well. So we will record this. We'll make the slides available. We'll post the chat on the website. So if you want to go back and review it, or for anyone who maybe wasn't able to attend, then they can go back. Any questions so far just about the setup? Oh, this is exciting. We have 43 people on. Wow. Okay, so just before I let you go and turn it over to Kari, I do want to just pitch something that we're going to start after our principles to actions, and you would have received this in your email. But as I mentioned, I really like to give people information so they can go out and do amazing things, right? So that's really, I like to be a behind the scenes kind of cheerleader. So I like to share information with you all. And if you're interested in maybe growing in your leadership or learning more about becoming a core advocate, you would have gotten this blurb in your email in the last one that said, kind of, let me know your interest. We've got about 10 people that have already said, yes, they're interested. And they have a whole toolkit. And my role in facilitating this would just to be able to create the space so that you all can connect and grow in your leadership. Kind of like with this today, I do not know much about what Kari is going to talk about. I know from the state level what's going on there, but as far as specific products from vendors and why teachers find value or why instructional coaches find value in them, that information I don't know. So my role is to facilitate that space so you all can connect and collaborate, and we can just do awesome things for kids in Iowa. So right now, before I turn it over to Kari, are there any questions from the state direction? I've tried to put some of that information out that no, we are not picking a screener for math like we did for reading. It's not a mandate. We know that it's best practice. There will be a facilitation guide probably in another year that will give guidance. That work was done this year. It was a planning year. Next year, it will go to the partner schools, Partners with a Purpose through C4K, and they'll kind of vet it and kind of pilot it, and then it'll roll out the following year. Well, if you think about more questions, then you can put those in the chat or you can email me, because obviously if you're on this webinar right now, then we connect in some way. And Kari, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and be your Vanna. And so I'm going to go to, I've got to move a couple. Okay, and I think that should be live screen and everyone should be able to see it. So this is Kari Pringle from Pella, and Kari and I are her curriculum director and my bureau chief at the DE are on the same work team for C4K. So that's kind of how Kari and I got connected last year, is they kind of connected us and we've been chatting ever since. So Kari, go ahead and introduce yourself and who's in your room and let me know when to turn the slide.
All right. Well, April, if you can, I'm not seeing our slides yet. Do you want to go ahead and pull them up?
Oh, there.
I see your slide.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me stop a share.
Sure.
And let me reshare, because I had them pulled up on mine. Let's try that again. How's that?
That looks good.
Okay, yay.
All right. Well, thanks, April. First off, I'm here. My name's Kari Pringle. I'm an instructional math coach, part-time math coach, and I teach gifted and talented mathematics, or two gifted and talented students, I guess you could say. We like to call them promising math students. But and I also have with me Sarah Kennan and Annie Foskett, that are both instructional coaches in our grades K-3 buildings. So they work with our primary grades, I guess you could say. And the reason that we, I guess, are starting or having this conversation is exactly as April said. We have had STAR Math as a universal screener for about a decade, and we had a district decision to move to FastBridge. And in doing that, I've had a lot of questions, and in particular of whether people have out there have any background knowledge in the FastBridge screeners and their product. And as far as I know quite a bit about STAR Math, not as much about FastBridge. We have had a trial run with it this spring, and that has generated a lot of questions in general. So that's what this, I guess, our little presentation's about. What I'll be showing you, our next couple slides are just to tell the rest of the group how we see a universal screener being used in the MTSS process. So as we go through this, this is interpretation by Pella, not necessarily interpretation by the state or anybody else. It's just what we're doing right now with a computerized math screener. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I highlighted number 2. Basically, you're looking at the 5 components of the Iowa MTSS framework, the components that make up the framework and the decision-making process. And we highlighted number 2 because this conversation is about this idea of universal screening. And Pella has been using an electronic computer adaptive screener for about a decade. Now, we haven't been using the MTSS process for a decade, but it seemed to work nicely into this whole process. And so this conversation, of course, is now we're making a switch and we want to see what other people know about the products that are out there. So we can go ahead and I won't read through the components. That's not what this conversation is really about, but it is about the universal screening of students. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So as we understand it, a universal screener is basically the administration of a quick, low-cost, repeatable testing of age-appropriate skills to all students that typically is conducted 3 times a year. I will let you know Pella has done it. We usually conduct the testing 5 times a year, just because we've really liked the data that we get and we feel we can make some good decisions from it. The second thing we know about a universal screener, or understand it to be, is that it provides evidence to help assess how functional our curriculum is, our core curriculum is, how our environment is, and how our instruction is, if it's functional, I guess you could say, in our school. The third thing we believe a universal screener can do is it probably best identifies students who may, and notice I have that underlined, may not be making expected progress and who may need additional diagnostic assessment or intervention. And why we underline that is, as everybody knows, when you give a test once, we need to look at more evidence than just that test, but it certainly is an identifier and it does generate questions on, do we have somebody here who is not responding to the universal instruction that we're providing? You can go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things we're starting to learn, and honestly, we're starting to learn it right now as we are starting to analyze 2 different products, is we're trying to understand maybe what a universal screener is not. And as we kind of take a look at it, we know that our screener is not a diagnostic or progress monitoring assessment. So we would not want to try to make the jump that the results we get from our screener can identify what a student knows or doesn't know. It's not that fine grain. It doesn't drill down to those specific skills. We also know that a universal screener is not an assessment to conclude what we should teach next. So it's not going to get us down to that decision making where, oh, all of a sudden kids didn't do well. Maybe we need to throw out our fractions unit and do something different. So it can't tell us that. The third thing is it is not to be used as a single indicator to make high stakes decisions like child retention, teacher evaluation, or funding decisions. And we actually came across that from the A-Reading and FAST, that comes off the A-Reading site and their knowledge base to remind us that this is one test and high stakes decisions shouldn't be made just from that test. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So then the question we're having right now, so why use it? Now, yes, the MTSS has that as a second component that you should have a screener, and that's a conversation in itself probably, but we're using an electronic screener, and I'll be curious to see what other people use as a universal screener. But why a mathematics screener has worked for us is, first off, we know that screeners that we don't create are valid and reliable are a valid and reliable test to compare our students to their classmates, to the school, to the district, and to national norms. We obviously don't have any tests that we create that provide us that kind of information. The second thing is we know that a math screener can draw attention to those students showing need very quickly. What we like is right away, if we have students that aren't responding, in other words, they aren't meeting benchmark, it generates PLC conversations, obviously, about those students not responding. And so it's a really good starting point. Anytime we do that, those screeners, obviously we're following that up with a PLC conversation of, so why not? What students aren't responding? The third thing is it obviously very efficiently finds students who may need additional support. These tests don't take very long, but they do take about 30 minutes of your day. So we don't want to say they don't take any time, but they are pretty efficient. There's no way we could do this paper pencil and get these results that quickly and be able to move forward. The last thing, we know that a math screener does a nice job of showing us growth trends. And what I mean by that is we can see trends in the robustness of our instruction in our curriculum. And I will have to say that what's been really interesting since we've adopted and really worked hard to integrate the Common Core state standards, we have found that our growth trends are improving. And again, we've used a screener for over a decade, and some of the best growth scores that we've seen have come out in probably the last 2 years. And we do attest that to the Common Core state standards. So we're really excited about that. And the data that we're getting would show that we have trends going in the right direction. Next slide. So anyway, I guess I've kind of said these things. Obviously, I probably have a bias towards STAR. I'm going to try very hard not to sell a product. That's not my job here. But we are moving to FastBridge, and a big part of that was cost. And so now I'm trying to get a good understanding if FastBridge is going to provide us with the same data, and do we feel that we can trust it. So that's just our information there. So if you're asking me a lot of FastBridge questions, I'm not an expert. I've been trying to do my homework on that. I do know we have an instructional coach here from Winterset, and I know they've used it longer than we have. And so I know she's here today, or I see she's in the chat. We might be able to direct some questions to her as well. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is kind of based on what we've seen so far with our use of 2 products. So STAR Math and FastBridge A-Math are both computer adaptive software programs. So as they test students, they are designed to adapt and change questions based on how students answer. So it should get us maybe a better profile of where the student really is at as far as understanding of understanding of our concepts. What I did is tried to show what I understand right now as how they compare. And so I tried to kind of keep this condensed the best I could. We can talk more about this, but basically when it comes down to the 2 of them, both have multiple choice problems, and they take about 30 minutes. I did find FastBridge testing went a little quicker, and partially I think that is STAR Math always has 34 math questions, and FastBridge seems to have 30. Now we've only done that once, but I believe they're a 30. Okay, so they're 30 for sure. What's interesting about FastBridge, I've actually taken a look at the test questions. I watched 3 different students take the test, and although we weren't looking for the answers and the types of not what what the answers were, what we need to be teaching, but I was looking at the nature of the questions. And what I found in FastBridge A-Math is they have a little more variety of the way students have to respond. So what I mean by that is they do have key entry. So some of the answers, students have to actually enter an answer with a keypad. STAR Math is strictly multiple choice. Now, FastAbridge does have a lot of multiple choice as well. So it's not that they aren't multiple choice, but there's a little variety there. FastBridge, I notice, also has a little bit more rigor, and what I mean by that is some of the questions were put forth on asking students to find the answer that was not correct. So there would be 3 different answers that were correct that students had to analyze, and that analysis takes a little more work than just looking for the correct answer. So that was of interest to us. That's definitely different than the STAR Math. So that's the only difference I can see as far as the types of questions they're getting. Now, and again, that's only one time watching FastBridge. Here's the thing about STAR Math. STAR Math does not include anything additional other than the screener. So if you would purchase just STAR Math, right now you'll get just a screener. And so there's no additional diagnostic tests that come with that package. And so it can't drill down any farther than just the general screener. Now, what I do know is they do have a product, STAR 360. We don't own that. We don't purchase that. That's fairly new. I don't know a lot about that, but that product does have additional diagnostic tests to go with it. So they are intended to drill down to more specific areas of need. FastBridge, on the other hand, the AMath that we purchased does come with these additional diagnostic tests. And those tests are supposed to be tests of automaticity, concept application, and process analysis. So as you can see, that was a selling point with our district admin. The product is cheaper and it had more components. So as you can imagine, that seemed like the way to go. Both have been reviewed by outside sources, clearinghouses that say both are valid and reliable for an RTI process. So that was kind of a moot point as well. I guess the third point, both products provide endless amounts of reports. I mean, you're going to get more information that you probably know what to do with. What it mattered to us that both have a growth report. So both of those growth reports are a real important piece of data to us. And those have always been key interest. And so as of now, we know both provide a growth report, plus numerous others. The last thing, both are computer adaptive. Right now, what I am seeing is STAR Math has a large variety. They have a huge data bank of problems that run the scope of K-12. FastBridge has I would not say have as wide of data bank, and I have confirmed that also with their rep. They're just a K-8 data bank, so you aren't going to get problems that move farther than 8th grade. And so as we get to maybe more in the informal conversation here, a concern for us is that maybe kids can top out a little bit on this, and it's a little harder for us to see maybe that gifted side of things, or students that are showing high promise and that are going beyond 8th grade concepts. So that maybe is a little bit of the difference we're seeing between the two. So you can go ahead and switch it there, April. So that's enough of me talking. I guess from there, we'll go ahead and open it up and see what people are thinking. I do want to add a thing. I add something here. The two instructional coaches I have here with us, we also have this early math component which is with FastBridge as well. Or it's not AMath, it's something different, but this early component. And if people have questions about that, feel free to ask our two instructional coaches about that as well. That's a different test, but part of the package.
Yes, so our kindergarten and first grade classes piloted or tried the early math this spring, and we had one kindergarten class also try AMath just to be able to compare the two. But that is maybe an option that if you go with FastBridge, you would want to do with your lower grades instead of AMath. And it's similar to early reading on the reading side.
Okay, so Kari, I want to thank you and thank your team for putting this together, because again, it was your willingness to just have this conversation, because this has probably been the most popular topic since I've came to the Department of Ed. So I was very happy that you were willing to share. Also, I did throw an R in your name. It's not Pringle, it's Pingle.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I know.
I'm called a Pringle all the time.
Sorry. So she just went with it. So please forgive me. I apologize. Those that know me well know I generally screw up names, and I got your first name right though. So there we go. So we do have some questions in the chat, and so let's take a look at those. And so the first question is, what grade did you pilot it with?
Well, and as far as we can't even say pilot. I mean, we're just doing it. So, because we purchased it. So we ran it in fourth, fifth, sixth grade. So our entire fourth, fifth, and sixth grade classrooms took the test, and then our lower grades were.
Yep. So there was between probably 3 and 5 teachers in second and third who piloted a math, and then pretty much all of our kindergarten and first grade teachers piloted or tried out the early math.
Okay, and the next question is, how long do the FastBridge assessments take to administer?
Yeah. Again, ours, as I watch students on average, it was about 20 minutes. Now, obviously you'll get a little give and take on that depending on students and their, we all know kids are different, but on the average it was 20. Star Math, I will say, almost always runs about 30 minutes and can't even go longer. Sometimes I have found it always took a class period. I had to usually generally put aside a 45-minute math period to take a STAR test, just by the nature of the questions.
And a question I had, it's not timed, correct? So even though or it is timed?
FastBridge is not timed. Star Math is timed.
And then the next question is, what is the per pupil cost of the FastBridge?
Yeah. My understanding is right now it's about $4 per student, FastBridge, and Star is double that. That's $8 per. And that is part of why we're switching over, is the cost.
And then what type of training will you do with your teachers for implementation this year? Or what kind of training have you done?
FastBridge will be providing training for us here this summer. So we will be bringing everybody in for a day of how to use, just how to use the whole program, all the components. So, yep, that's with it. And I know if you ask if we're paying for that I don't know. I don't know if that was additional or if that came with the product. That I don't know. I could find out though.
This spring, to get our teachers ready in the K-3 world for the administering the tests, we just relied on the videos that FastBridge put on their website. And so it's similar to like when you got trained for doing, in Iowa Tier, doing the reading tests. They have great videos to watch to see what the test should look like. And then they have videos on how to administer it. They have directions that you can print out. And so we just went through that with our teachers. So then they felt ready because they could actually see it before they had to do it themselves. So that was really good. 2 things that I would like to add. For administering the early math, we subbed teachers out for a full day to do it. So they just pulled kids one-on-one to administer those tests. And it didn't take the whole day, maybe a little over half the day to do their whole class. But that does take a little bit more time. It's like about 4 sub-tests that they have to go through. Yep, correct. It's different. The early math is composed of different sub-tests that change throughout the year, similar to early reading. And so they have the different sub-tests that they have to administer with each of the students. Another thing I wanted to say too was in A math, it reads the tests to them aloud. So they have headphones on, it'll read them every question. Star Math, I don't believe reads anything to them. Although if they have accommodations, someone could read it to them. But it's standard for everyone in A math to have each of the questions read to them.
And so I'm just gonna, before I take the next question, I just wanna reiterate to those that are on that it's not the intention of any of us to like say, oh, you should go get FastBridge or Star or any of those. It was just to start having that conversation. So this is just around having that dialogue and creating the space. So just in case you joined in later. The question is, so what tests make up early math?
They're different per grade level. That's why I guess I'm not talking right away. I was going to try to pull it up. So kindergarten has different tests in the fall, winter, spring, and first grade has different tests in the fall, winter, spring. So if we can come back to that question, we could pull it up and then we'll let you know in a little bit.
Okay, sure. There's another cost one, but I think is there a progress monitoring piece?
Yeah, so that's one of FastBridge's selling points is that not only do they have the screener, but then they have a progress monitoring diagnostic tool as well. And they have about 3 different tools, a CBM, a progress monitoring, and somebody can correct me that too. We're still new to that, and like a process, like a process where you can go in and actually see, what is it students are doing. So the process by which there's errors and things like that. And then that automaticity test too. So they do have those components. Now, I think Star 360 has all those components as well, but we don't have experience with that.
Okay, next question. Have you found a correlation between your Iowa assessment scores and your FAST-A math scores?
Well, for right now, we do not. We haven't done enough of that work because we just did the testing. I would say even with STAR, that's a really good question. I've always felt we've done, it's never been they'll say it's a predictor, that, it's a predictor of how we'll do there. I don't think we've always seen a direct correlation between the two.
And Tamara, why don't you jump in?
I feel like STAR's been more accurate in our opinion, but we give it 5 times. So I guess that's the difference. ITBS is once. So
I was just pausing there to see if Tamara had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I will add to that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I would say, so we give Iowa assessments all the way down to 1st grade, and it was very disappointing because on early math, we felt like our kids were doing very well, but on the Iowa assessments, they did not. And the only thing that we can correlate that to is the Iowa assessments not being aligned to the core. As far as the other grade levels, it was pretty similar. I guess, I don't know if I would call it an indicator of how well that they did, but until the assessments that we're taking are aligned to the core, I think it's kind of hard to say that that would be an indicator.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Tamara. So do you feel like the FAST tests that you're giving, that those are aligned to the standards?
I do. I am a little bit concerned with automaticity because there's a couple of different ways that you can do the automaticity. Some of them are just fact recall. But when you get into the older grades, they're asking, you can do some analyzing where they're looking for a standard algorithm before that's actually taught in the core. So there's a little bit of disconnect, but for the most part, I would say, yes, it is aligned to the core.
Okay. Next question. Is A math questions directed towards math concepts? Or is it more, I think the question is it just the skills and the procedures, or is it getting to with the problem solving?
I'll let is it Tamara? I'll let her speak too. But when I watched those 30 questions go by, there were very good conceptual questions. I liked that variety. So it's not just algorithm based.
Absolutely, I would agree.
Okay, next question. How is FastBridge currently accessed by your teachers? Is it in the Iowa tier?
Our product is not. So it's just like if you would buy a software program, you log into their site and it's all online. So
the nice thing is, though, for teachers who are used to using Iowa Tier, is it's almost exactly the same. A lot of it's really familiar looking. The look is maybe a little different, but everything you see is almost exactly the same. So it's pretty friendly.
And A math looks pretty identical to A reading, so the students coming in to take it, it's familiar to them already as well.
So the comment here is, it says K is numeral, ID, match quantity, number sequence, decomposing. First is numeral ID, number sequence, decomposing, place value, visual story problems. So we will also put the chat on the website, so you'll be able to look that up. Next question is, was there concern about loss of instructional time administering 2 screeners, one for math and one for reading?
Sure. We've been giving STAR Math and STAR Reading for a long time. That has always been, yeah, we don't like to have to give up the 30 minutes. But what we get from those screeners is pretty important. So I think you just, like I was saying before, it's such an efficient way later, though, down the road. So once you give that, yes, the time to give it takes some instructional time. But once you have it, the decisions you're making in your PLCs based off of the questions you're generating from that are critical. I think what you might lose in a bit of instruction time there, you'll turn around and be making the best instructional decisions for kids later. So I think it's worth the time. Now, you can debate whether you need to do it 5 or 3. A lot of the literature I'm seeing recommends 3 times. We just happen to do it 5 because teachers like the data that they get.
Yeah, well, and 5, not that it has to be aligned to quarters, but when we did it 5 times a year is at the beginning of the year to see where they were at, and then at the end of every quarter. In the K-3 world next year, we're going to start doing 3 times a year, and then if we want to increase it, we can.
In April, I would jump in here too. We do it a little bit different in that we have an assessment team. And the assessment team is made up of our curriculum director and instructional coaches. And we go around to each classroom and pull kids out. So therefore, the teacher can continue instructing and not as much instructional time is lost.
Okay. The next one, does FastBridge have a progress monitoring for weekly? And does it take 20 minutes as well for the progress monitoring?
Tamara, you're going to have to answer that one.
Okay, it's kind of a loaded question, but yes, you can progress monitor weekly, and the 20 minutes, it depends on what test you're taking. They call it CAP math. It's a concepts and applications. That's their progress monitoring, because you can't progress monitor a math since it's an adaptive test. So that one is taking more like the 20 minutes. But if you're doing some of the early math, they were talking about them earlier, like the number ID or the number sequencing or decomposing, those are one-on-one, and they usually take less than 2 minutes.
Okay, and then Rhonda made a comment that you can turn the sound on in Star Math so questions can be read to them if you choose that option.
Yeah, that's correct. I think, yeah, maybe we weren't clear on that. You can choose to have that turned on. I know we just don't. They might in the lower grades. We just, yeah, but you're right. That is correct.
Okay, next question is, how user-friendly did you feel that the system was?
It's user-friendly. Yeah, very easy to get in, take the test. Very, very efficient.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Tamara.
I would say for us, it's been a little bit hairy, but I think it's because this was a lab year for FAST. So there were a lot of things that changed throughout the year. So we're hopeful that next year things will be more permanent and in place.
Okay, for students, teachers, and admin, that was the rest of that question. Was it user-friendly for not only the students, but what about for the teachers and the admin?
Yeah, I think like anything, once you get your training, part of it, when you get so many reports and so much data, it takes some time to understand. But I felt, after coming out of a STAR environment, which has a lot of information and a lot to learn, I was able to turn around and find almost all that very quickly with FAST. So in that regards, I think it's just a matter of getting familiar with what these things do. And once you kind of know that data, everybody kind of has similarities in the sense of you're looking for the same thing. So I think it's been pretty user-friendly once you've had some training, yeah.
And the other thing too is there's a really good resource within the program that you can ask questions. There's a plethora of webinars and other questions that have been asked and answered. So there are places to go to find out answers to your questions.
Something that was nice too is in Iowa Tier, if you take a reading, unless you did the lab this year, you had to log in every student in a reading before they could take the test. And so we were a little worried with a math, but with FastBridge and a math, each student has a username and password that they just log themselves into. So you didn't have that issue with a math. We're hoping it'll be the same with a reading and FastBridge too.
Okay, next one is, did your district feel that the screener results were consistent with what the teachers would expect? In other words, did you feel like the right students were being identified?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to STAR first because I've known that for so long. It's been highly accurate. We feel like, you'll get an occasional outlier, but generally, when you look at patterns over time, kids, we do feel like it's a really good indicator. I can't speak to FAST yet. We've given it one time. And so I won't speak to that at this point. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I would say that yes, it was. Well, there were no big surprises when we got our data back. The only thing with any computer test is you have to monitor those students that might be clicking through things instead of taking their time and doing what they need to do. So it's important to monitor as they're taking the test.
Tamara, I have a quick question about that. Does FAST show how long a student, like, does it give you the time students were on?
I don't believe so.
Okay, where STAR will tell you how long the student took. So yeah, if you go in and a kid took 5 minutes, you know it's time for a retake because you know they
Right.
can try.
Yeah, if there's a student that scores extremely low, the program will red flag them. So then you can go back and administer it again if you feel like that, you know, isn't what that student should have performed at. But other than that, I not that I'm aware of, is there a time that you can look and see how long they took?
So what grades are timed again?
Well, in STAR, all levels all the problems are timed.
Okay.
But it always seemed like they had plenty of time. So I don't know what the time frame was, but a little clock would come up eventually and it'd switch them to the next question. So you couldn't take forever. FAST, I believe, is no timer.
For A math, there is not time. For the early math, some of the tests are 1 minute tests. Others are, they have you record how much time it takes, but it doesn't stop the student after a certain time.
Is that similar to reading, or are all the reading tests timed?
The same.
Same? Okay. And next question is, will you assess all students 5 times a year?
That is a great question. I just sat in a PLC about that today. We're starting to wonder, you know, if this is a screener, and we are not concerned about anybody, you know, do we need to be screening everybody? That's a great question. We're working on answering that one. Don't have an answer yet. But we typically have screened everybody all 5 times.
And Winterset just does the 3 times for everybody.
How much?
I do want to add
Go
something
ahead.
why we do it 5 times. Can I add something to that? So one of the things with STAR anyway that's interesting is that this growth report that's so important to us is that when you look at the gifted side of things, and that's kind of the world I'm working with, is that a lot of times these kids will hit 99, right? And we're like, oh, well, they're 99, they're fine. Life's good. Let's worry about everybody in the middle and kids that are struggling. And the thing about students that are gifted is that, right, they hit 99, but are they growing? And so we need to make sure these reports do a nice job of comparing kids that score high scaled scores, get compared to other kids with high scaled scores, and then we see if they're actually growing within that 99th percentile. And STAR, I will have to say, did a fantastic job of being able to tell me that those students are also responding to our gifted services. Because a lot of times they can kind of get left in the, well, they're 99, we're good. Let's not worry about them. They'll be fine. They'll teach themselves, you know, whatever. And what STAR growth reports would give us, and we're hoping FAST will do this as well, is that we know that they too are growing. Just because they're at the 99th doesn't necessarily mean they're growing. So those scaled scores become really important, and those growth scores become really important.
Okay, and how much training did it require? So how much training did your teachers get, and did your students receive before you? I know that you were already giving something, but then before you changed it over.
Gosh, we've had it so long, it became more of a train the trainer kind of thing. So back when we first purchased STAR, some of us, you know, got like I think we had purchased a day of, you know, a day to be able to work with a STAR rep. And then we had some additional time to ask questions, you know, where we had them for a year to ask questions as much as we needed to. And then we took those leaders that knew that, and it was more of a train the teacher kind of thing.
Okay, and it looks like, and before I give the last question that's in the chat, which we can still take other questions. I mean, anybody can unmute, and we'll do that next after we take them in the chat, because sometimes people like to ask their question verbally. But just make sure if you've not put your name in the chat that you do, so I can follow up with you. And so if you would just take a minute to do that, just in case you have to leave, because I know some people, they might have to leave. So the next question is, does the data follow the student grade to grade or school to school if they transfer?
Yeah. Well, as far as the data, sure, the data follows our kids. You know, I can go back and access data in any grade level at any time. But as far as a and, you know, from building to building, sure. So our lower grades come up and, you know, we can access that. But as far as transferring to another school, no, of course they'd have to have the product. So that maybe FastBridge does. I don't know enough about that.
Iowa Tier it did for reading.
I would doubt it because I can see with Iowa Tier maybe they did because that was a state mandated. Everybody had to be plugging in. But as far as typically like a STAR product, that data isn't going to transfer to another school unless they've got the product. I can't imagine that would happen.
April, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That was me. I just want to follow up with that. And I'm talking about within the same district. We have obviously we have 13 elementaries. So I'm wondering if a kid transfers from one of our elementaries to the other, and I'm talking for FastBridge, will that data, our whole district would have the FastBridge purchased?
Yeah. You would be able to access it from anywhere.
Anywhere. And then what about like when they leave from 5th grade and go on to the middle school for 6th grade, would a 6th grade instructional coach have access to see their history of where they were in 3rd and 4th and 5th?
Tamara, you might be able to answer that better. I believe so, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know for sure either because this is our first year as well, but the students each have their own password and username. So I can't imagine that they wouldn't just be able to transfer that student into a new classroom. So I would assume that would work seamlessly, assuming that school had FastBridge access as well.
So when you say a student has their own username and password, so that student like on year 2 or year 3 can see all the access, can see their previous years in there.
The student doesn't have access to the data. They just have access to, if you've set them up for the screener or for progress monitoring, then they can get into that to take the assessment. But as far as seeing data, the student can't see any of that.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, it's another question. How are students entered into the FastBridge system? So how do they get enrolled?
Well, I'll speak first, and Tamara, you might have a different way we did it. We wanted our students' usernames and passwords to match up with their district username and password. So I will tell you, our technology, one of our technology support people entered that all by hand. So we did not have a way that as of now, they didn't have any way we could do that in any kind of drop, like a CVC type file. So that was a bit cumbersome, but now it's in, and once it's in, it's in.
Yep, and we are the same. We did the same way.
Okay, so Tamara, I wanted to open it up to, were there things that you feel are valuable that we have not asked about or talked about already?
One thing that we're struggling with a bit is for the A Math, it gives you a score, but it does not tell you like what questions they missed. And I realize that's part of being a screener. What it does give you is it says if a student scored this number or within this range of numbers, these are the skills they likely have and don't have. So that's been a little bit challenging for our teachers to interpret exactly what a score means. So I would just kind of caution you in that and figuring out a way to share with your teachers on how to interpret the scores when they get them.
I'd like to piggyback off of that. As far as STAR is concerned, I think that's a same issue. And I think that's why we're starting to look at, when we're talking about computer adaptive tests and kids are getting a myriad of questions, that they are, just like Tamara said, these are screeners, and I don't think they're intended to be able to tell us what they could and could not do. And so that what they do is they give you this generality, these general statements that, just like Tamara said, if they score here, then here's what the computer is going to, the computer adaptive software is going to tell you they might be able to do or not do. And with STAR, over the 10 years we've had it, we know that even that screener, as much as we like the data, can't help us get down to that smaller grain size. It can give us a general statement, and then we have to ask questions of that data, and then drill down to the things that are closer to our instruction, which is, our tests, our progression checkpoints, other tests that were, other measurements. So I think it's important to know that these are screeners, and that's what they're intended to do, is kind of generate that next question.
Right. And the other thing that I'd like to add too is we did ours K-8 this year, and in the 7th and 8th grade, it was not very successful because of what you talked about earlier, in that kids can top out. So we were having kids in 7th grade top out. Well, then obviously for next year for 8th grade, that doesn't make any sense to take that assessment again. So for 7th and 8th grade, we are looking into doing iReady, just because we didn't feel like FastBridge was appropriate for 7th and 8th grade.
And there was a comment that said, while we have 13,000 elementary students, they can't imagine having all the students entered manually. But I think, if I heard you right, it was because you wanted them to have the same username and password. So is there a way for them to enter your students if you don't want that?
They'll generate one for you then. So they'll give you something, but it's a very, it's a real strange, it's another password to learn. But yeah, they'll give you a generated. We just wanted to keep that in sync. We have a lot of software programs we use and want kids using the same. So that's just purely our preference.
So, and there was a clarifying question. So students don't have to be entered manually, but if you want them to have a specific username and login because you're using multiple systems, then that would need to be done.
Correct. I'm 99.9% sure of that. Tamara, do you know?
I would assume so. I would have to check with our tech department because they did all of that.
I'm almost sure that's how it worked. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is anyone using any other screeners that are not computer generated? So I guess we'll let those of you respond in the chat. Sarah Straw says, yes, we use Boulder Valley. Sarah, do you want to jump on and unmute yourself and speak a little bit about that?
Hi, we're in Emmitsburg here, and we use Boulder Valley Assessments, which also you can get the database with it, which is called the Forefront, where it houses all the data. And that is a one-to-one student interview, and then also a written that the student completes, and then you score and put into the database.
Okay, so if we have other questions around Boulder Valley, I'm sure Sarah would be happy to answer those as well. Sarah, is that aligned? Do you feel like that's one question I have? Is that timed?
It is not timed.
And is it aligned to the standards?
It is aligned to standards, yes.
Okay. And you feel like it picks the right kids?
We have given it to all just to help us know what areas we need to attack in our instruction. And I can't say that there's been huge surprises. Students that have struggled in areas, we see struggle on the Boulder Valley assessment as well.
Okay. And what about as far as like the correlation between, are you seeing the same results on that as around the Iowa assessment?
We just took our spring Iowa assessments, and we have one grade that is like almost exactly scored the same in math and Iowa assessments as they did on Boulder Valley. And then we have another grade that is like 20 points different on their math total as compared to their Forefront. So it really seemed to vary. I see there's a question about grade levels. We do it K4, but I believe that it is K5.
I was trying to think of some of the other bigger questions that we've already answered around these ones so that we could, ask. So if you have more questions, go ahead and put them into the chat there. Or if you'd rather pipe in, and if you're using something else, if you're using another screener, like we would love for you to unmute yourself and say, hey, I can share about this, because this conversation was really about the screeners and it wasn't about a particular product. So we definitely want to, if there's other ones out there, or you can put it into the chat. How long did the Boulder Valley assessment take?
It doesn't take very long in the K1 grades. because they are pretty quick on their answers. This is our second year with it, and our third and fourth graders were much quicker. They know how to explain their answers, and I guess kind of what we're looking for when we get their answers, because the one-to-one is what takes a while. So it really depends on your students too. Some can come and go through the 5 questions or so really quickly, and then some really think it through and they talk through their reasoning. So it's pretty dependent.
And how many times do you give the Boulder Valley?
We give it 3 times a year. They're like in the fall, and then in the winter, and then again in the spring.
And is there a progress monitoring that goes along with that also?
There is not with it. It's more of like a homegrown kind of thing so that we have ideas if they're progressing or not.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there, and I want to thank, I mean, and we can stay on here if there's more questions. I really wasn't sure like how long it would take and how long Kari's presentation would be. So I know I said we would go from like 1 to 2:30, and like we would maybe stay over if there were more questions. However, you know, we want to respect everybody's time also, and the fact that we don't want to just hang on if there's not questions. So a couple of things is, are there any questions about what's going on at the state as far as the K-6 universal screener and progress monitoring and that sort of thing? Because we have received a lot of questions, or it's been communicated with me that there's a lot of misunderstandings out there about what we're going to be doing or what we're getting ready to do. We are trying to emulate the process that was done with the reading for math. The difference is we don't have the legislative mandate, and we don't have the funding for that. So it rolls a little different, but we are trying to plan and get ready to offer the same assistance around the reading, around the math that was offered around the reading. But yeah, we're not gonna buy anything. You know, funds are tight everywhere. So I want to thank everyone who shared. I think that this was amazing, and it was a topic that definitely people were interested in. And as I said, if you entered your name in the chat, if you just entered your first name, like I see Tina in there, Tina, I might have more than one Tina in there. So if you just gave me a first name, or when you log in, it just gives me a first name. If you could give me your full name or your email, just because I am going to send you, thank you, Rhonda. I am going to send everybody a follow-up survey just to find out what other topics might we want to talk about going forward, because I think this was extremely valuable, very organic. It was just something that's been a very popular topic. And as I said, when I had just inquired for a consultant, my inbox exploded. And so I know it's on everybody's radar. So I want to thank you all again, and we will get this recording posted. And you know, we can't give a virtual round of applause, but we're all applauding for those of you that shared and everything. So and I'll stay on for a little bit, so if you have additional follow-up questions. And I just love that we could do, you know, I've attended other things that are a live chat, but I'm like, hey, we can do this in Iowa and get that connection and that conversation going across our states with you know, coaches and leadership and that sort of thing, because the more we're communicating and working collaboratively, just hopefully the better that is for our kiddos, right? It's why we all go to work. So we do these jobs. So as I said, I'll stay on, and then I'll get the recording posted. It'll take a little while to process and upload because it'll be rather large and big, but I'll throw it on the website. So any last minute thoughts or from Kari or Tamara or any of you that shared?
Not from us.
You were very brave. She was just, she didn't know what she was getting into. I asked her, she's like, yep, I'll do it. So you are all welcome. Lots of thank yous in the chat, lots of great comments. So we're glad it was useful and a good use of everybody's time.
We don't have anything else, do we? April, are you okay if we log out?
Yeah, go ahead and log out.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. I don't need to hold you guys up because it seems like the questions, I just kind of generally, I stick around. So, yep.
All right, we appreciate it. Thanks for allowing us. Yeah, it was good for us to hear from other people. And a lot of the questions people ask are exactly the questions we ask.
Yep.
You know,
And that's,
like the same thing.
yeah. And it's valuable for them to hear. And, oh, it looks like the Boulder Valley assessments are free, but the data house is what costs. It costs about $2 a student, somebody thought. So,
Okay.
yeah,
okay.
so good information. So,
All right.
nope, thank
April,
you,
I'm
ladies.
going to leave. We can follow up if need be.
Okay,
later.
perfect. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks.
Bye-bye, ladies.
Bye.
Tamara, thank you so much. And Sarah Sarah just pieced out, but Sarah Straw pieced out before I can mention her. But Tamara, thanks for jumping in. I was hoping you were going to be able to make it. So,
No problem.
we've just been connecting like a lot.
I know, right?
I know. So, all right. Well, everyone, enjoy your holiday weekend. Thank you for attending. And if you're at the end of the school year, enjoy your summer. If you're not, hang in there. You're almost there. And yep, this was great, everyone. Thank you.